time to move on to our next presentation of the day. What role does urban planning play in smarter mobility in Africa? And what are the issues of planning for density? And we're chatting to Carol Mutiso. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's the project officer at Transport Climate Strategy in Kenya. Hi, Carol. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm in Nairobi currently. Horrible weather. We are used to very warm tropical weather, but we are managing. Very excited to be in this event. COVID has made us transition to other technologies, and with technology, it comes with its challenges. All right. So as you've already introduced me, my name is Carol Mutiso. I work for Advancing in Transport Climate Strategies project. It is a project that is funded by the International Climate Initiative of the German Ministry for the Environment and Nature Conservation. And we work in different countries. As you can see, we work in Morocco, here in Kenya, and in Vietnam. So the project is implemented in two levels. There's the international level where we are reaching out on the global level on peer learning on climate finance and renewable fuel strategies, such as the pursuing of hydrogen. And on national level, we have the reliable data aspect, building institutions and capacity building, because our aim is to support on emission quantification and assessment. As you see here in this graph, emissions are increasing, and especially from transport sector. And we have an obligation as institutions, as governments working in environment and climate change to meet this target on climate action SDG 13. And we also have our Paris Agreement, where we are trying to limit our transport, not transport, but rather to limit our emissions at certain levels so that we don't supersede the 1.5 degrees. Then, as mentioned, on the capacity area, we look at different aspects of mitigation, and this is where I want to narrow down to the specific work that we are doing that is related to this event. When we think about the comprehensive approach to greenhouse gas emissions reductions, there are various components that we look at. There's avoiding unnecessary trips to reduce the kilometers traveled, shifting to more environment-friendly modes such as cycling, improving, that is, the fuel efficiency of the vehicles, whether we are switching to electric mobility or low carbon fuels and all that. And urban planning for reducing now travel demand, to organize for available space to offer different mode of choices. When you look at different choices of transport that are available, planning for infrastructure is at the core of that. And that is where now the aspect of urban planning and mobility comes in. And how we avoid the necessary trips, this is now some of the ways we have to think about how we plan for smart logistics. We look at the high density mixed land use planning, information communication technology. With the technologies that are coming, they are playing a very major role in smart mobility. We look at issues like restricting parking and all that. And as far as, let me go back a little bit and just say, by influencing the spatial structure of locations in urban environment, land use planning can really contribute to minimization of the need to travel in the first place. When you look at the kilometers driven and all that, so dense and mixed development helps to keep also cycling and issues such as walking very much attractive. Then on shifting of transport, we have to also think about how do we plan for this. And we look at two aspects, and those are there's a putting measures in place that will make transport or using of vehicles not very attractive, to kind of push people away from transport, road transport, and to other alternative modes which are more friendly. And also putting like pull measures in place. These are the sort of incentives that will shift to these attractive modes of transport. But we all know in our African cities, this is more of I wouldn't say dream than reality, because we have what we have. We want to have like an expectation where we have like cities where people, there are no cars dominating the areas and all that. This is an example of a road avenue here in Nairobi, where currently it's looking like this, but before, this was the reality. You can see the amount of vehicles, there are businesses, there's the motorcycles, private cars, and indeed we have to factor in that urban space has to serve the variety of human needs, which includes, of course, housing, working, social interactions, leisure, mobility of people, and so on. So, in most cases, what we think as African nations is to think of, let's put up very nice infrastructure, let's build more roads, let's put up more highways, because of course mobility in form of motorist transport requires increasing share of land and so on, and much of urban spaces in Africa is being dedicated for roads. This is the reality that happens. We'll build more road spaces, and you are building roads for more cars. So what I'm trying to say is that there's this cycle of, there's the interaction of traffic and land use, where you have the more car traffic and all that leading to more traffic, as shown in the previous slide. And we have to acknowledge that there's interaction between land use, urban development, and transport. And if we are going to plan for future smart mobility issues, we have to think about the infrastructure. What does our transport look like in the coming years? We are even talking about issues such as e-mobility. Are we planning for those infrastructures? Issues of NMT, non-motorized transport, facilities for cycling, facilities for providing for car sharing and parking and all that. That is something that we have to acknowledge, that there's need for that traffic and land use interaction from the word go. So what needs to be considered when you are planning for this transports with the aspect of the future and what we are envisioning as nations. So for new developments, what we need to ask ourselves as policymakers is, for example, are the new developments area located along attractive public transport routes? Does planning guarantee use of public transport both in both directions? Because we've heard about the situation in Nairobi, where policymakers thought the traffic is being caused by public transport. What we have here, we call them matatus. Let's remove them from the road. But when that was done, the result was everybody who has a car was outside with their own small car, and it resulted in in more traffic. So when we are thinking of new developments, whether it's structures and all that, we have to make sure that it is attractive for public transport routes, because we know that the occupancy rates is very high compared to a person who is only occupying one person per vehicle. Then another aspect we have to look at is decentralized facilities, and ask ourselves whether the facilities for daily needs, we have schools, we have administrative needs, whether they're accessible by foot or bike, because having excessive concentration of utilities, if we drive them away from the population and where people are, it will mean that people will be forced to choose motorized transport as a way of commuting. Also, there's the issue of increasing use of public transport. Can areas of daily life be reached by public transport? And we've seen also the example of routing of all the routes, and making sure that we can provide alternative services through, for example, use of BRT or mass rapid transit. There's the usual use of trams and light rail and such issues. The issue of access to stops, I know it's very familiar with many African cities. It's not only Nairobi, where you think about where your next stop is going to be, then you opt to use your private car, because first of all, maybe it's not safe to walk. And here I bring the issues of women in transport, where when you look at the statistics and the information, a lot of us will feel it's more safe for me to own a car and drive rather than walk in an unsafe area trying to access the public transport. Then the other issue is public transport. When we look at are there any measures to separate public transport and motorized transport, such as traffic lights? Then there's the minimization of space in new urban spaces, limitation of residential and commercial per capita, because when you fail to plan for this, you are planning for infrastructure that will not serve the large population, and we know the urbanization rates in our cities is increasing. There's also the hindrance caused by parked vehicles. When we walk around our cities, we can always see that a lot of space is occupied by parking of cars and all that, because it's generating revenue for the city on one hand, but it's causing an inconvenience to the flow of traffic that is demanded. Then the issue of construction of parking facilities, we have to look at whether there are any conflicts between the different modes of transport. I have not seen many cities with parking facilities, for example, for bicycles. So if somebody wants to, let's say, ride his bicycle, there will be that conflict, because the parking spaces that are being allotted are for vehicles and not for bicycles. You might even find your bicycle has been vandalized. So we need to take in consideration when planning for that, that the parking facilities consider the different modes of transport. Then another issue that is neglected, and especially in the outskirts of the cities, is the freight transport. And for the Kenya example, we have the transit corridors that are connecting to the neighboring cities. So we have to think about whether we have like freight centers that have good connection to road or other services such as rail, because we know we can shift the freight from road to rail, and that will have even a better impact to the environment. So my basic message that I want to pass is that we have to get it right from the planning level. When we think about smart mobility, we have to think about where will the infrastructure be. If we are thinking about e-mobility, if we are thinking about NMT and cycling access and all that, we have to get it right from the beginning. Otherwise, we keep talking in theory and nothing is even translated on the ground. And the challenge to the audience is to just imagine what our cities will look like, and we analyze the current trends. And if we do nothing, what will happen? Because it's not like we have like extra land somewhere where we can get. We have to plan with what we have and solve the future challenges in advance. That is it from my end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Carol. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the question bar there, and we will ask Carol. But Carol, I think I've got to ask. You did mention that if we're talking in circles or talking in theory when it comes to implementing, um, bicycle routes and that sort of stuff, how do we then kind of really bring it across for places like South Africa where we don't have the infrastructure? Where do we have to build completely separate routes from completely different areas within the city? Or how do we work around that problem?
I think there's an option of putting like push measures or some incentive in place already. I have shown the example of the
Mhm.
case for Nairobi, where it was very crowded. It was one of our streets, very crowded. We didn't have space in that current area. So what the city planners can do is to see where to sort of mobilize and put together like if it's a bus stop, where can we shift it so that we can provide more walking space, especially in the CBD areas. Yeah, so there's always like an in between. Unfortunately, something has to give, because, as I said, there's no like additional space, but we need comfortable and attractive cities to work in, to live in, to breathe fresh air. So I think it's upon the policymakers to see where to strike a balance and how to move forward. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. I know that you are going to be around in the networking sessions and in the exhibition area as well. So if anyone wants to get in touch with Carol, you can do it as the conference continues over the week as well. Thank you very much for your time.